And welcome back, everybody. This is the last in our series of unpacking the new and changing NRS standards. This one is Credential Attainment. So hopefully you're all ready to finish this off and learn about credentials and Table 5. As always, we'll start with a little review. Last week we talked about employment performance indicators. That's the other set of exit-based indicators for us. And one question that came up was about the date of exit. If you do a scheduled future service, if that date of exit becomes retroactive to the last date of service, if that person fails to come in on that future date. And John, I looked through all of my notes and materials, and I couldn't find anything to refute that. I am, like I say, I think I'm 90% sure that if you have a scheduled future service and that participant doesn't return for that future service by that date, that their last hour's date becomes their last date of service. I don't think that changes because of a scheduled future service that they don't follow up on. Did you find any other information about that?
No, I have not spoken with Shannon
Okay.
or anyone else from the Literacy Pro team. I have it on my list, but it is something that, and I'm writing a note right now here to email Shannon and carbon copy you and some others so that we can get some not guidance, but some updates or confirmation as it relates to our understanding and how they proceed to move forward, because I'm getting a little bit of a different message from Shannon, if I interpreted correctly.
Sure.
That overview.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I have not followed up yet, but I shall.
Well, and I was remiss in not trying to get a hold of Jay or anyone from his team either, just to confirm that. I did review the Teagle though, and that it led me, the language in there led me to believe, it's not rock solid, of course, but it led me to believe that that is the correct way to do it, is that date of exit is retroactive into last date of service. Were there any other questions about the employment performance indicators before we move on and talk about credential attainment?
Before you move forward, Becky, in terms of employment's performance indicators and measurable skill gain, given your experience working with one-stops and Kay, Nancy, and Carla, yours as well, how do you anticipate that job training portion that we can't data match with the National Student Clearinghouse?
I think we're going to have to be more proactive in follow-up and using our partnerships with our Title I and Title III partners to determine if any of our participants are in an activity that qualifies for that. That the job training, I think, is one of the things that is a little bit of a gray area still in all of the regs that I've seen. And even the guidance, I think, leaves some room for interpretation at times. And I think that, we're probably going to be finding our way a little bit on that one. And I would certainly rely on our Title I partners who have dealt with those kinds of questions for longer than we have, certainly to help us with that, but also to help us with that follow-up. And I think it's something that we'll certainly talk about throughout this presentation as well, because that job training plays a role in the credential attainment indicator as well.
Having just returned from a Box Elder Job Corps site visit yesterday and tour, and seeing all their different vocational trade programs and seeing their mobile fire unit, culinary, tractor trailer that can feed up to 300 individuals, and I'm just wondering if those non-one-stop job training outcomes and the resultant follow-up will be a bit more of a tracking survey follow-up expectation for local providers,
Yeah,
as well as working with our partners and how that, and maybe too, we need to make sure that when the MOUs are being drafted at maybe the higher level or the workforce council, I need to make certain that, I don't know, we can maintain open channels of communication for that follow-up. I don't want to get so focused on chasing these surveyed outcome measures, but at the same time we need to perform our due diligence, and so I don't know if that just needs to be articulated more formally.
No, I agree, John, and I don't know how else we would follow up on some of those things other than do some survey and tracking. And I think it's going to be a shift in the relationship that we have with participants going forward as well. That their expectation is not that when they complete their high school equivalency with us, they're just done and we'll never talk to them again. I don't think that there's any provider who gives them that impression. I know from talking with my colleagues around the state that they do see past students who, come in, give them updates. They run into them in the community and visit with them a little bit about what they're doing now, but certainly there will be a more formalized process of, I'm going to be contacting you within the next year just to see, are you employed? Have you had any employment training? Are you enrolled in a post-secondary program? What are you doing now beyond GED? And that the expectation is too, that I believe that our programs will be actively involved in some of the career counseling activities that lead into those post-high school equivalency goals and the achievement of those goals. So I do think it's a shift away from the way we've thought in the last few years, and there's people on the phone who I know have been around at least as long as me and sometimes longer. So I think that they remember too when we did more of that career counseling kind of activity, and maybe we're involved in some Title I funded activities as well. So I think it's a shift back to some of those past experiences that some of us have had in the field. So, anybody else have thoughts on that? You can share them as we go forward too, because like I said, we're going to be discussing some of those topics as we move forward and talk about the credential attainment indicator. Credential attainment is similar to the old Table 5 measure of GED attainment that we're used to. However, under WIOA, we've expanded the definition of a credential, what a credential means. And we've added some additional qualifications that determine if an earned credential can be counted on Table 5. So you can see this explanation up on the screen, the components of the credential indicator, that not only can we count the attainment of a high school equivalency, so GED or TASC or another high school equivalency, but we can also count the attainment of a post-secondary credential on Table 5. And those credentials count even if they're gained up to 1 year following program exit. And these are new features under WIOA. So we've never had that ability to count a recognized post-secondary credential, and we'll talk more about what that means. And we have not had the ability to count a secondary credential attainment beyond our program year in the past. If they didn't finish that GED before June 30th, it didn't always count on our tables. We did have the ability to go back and capture it sometimes for the final state report, but not a whole year after a participant exited. So that's a shift as well. But, and there's always a but, right? But if you look here, the attainment of that high school equivalency only counts as a credential attainment if their participant is employed or if they're enrolled in a post-secondary education or training program within that 1 year after exit. And this is a big change from the former obtained GED performance measure. It doesn't matter that they got the GED or the task or any other high school equivalency. It won't count on Table 5 as a credential attainment if they weren't either employed within a year after their exit or enrolled in some kind of post-secondary education or employment training program within that year. Any questions about that? We're going to look
for
at
clarification. Sorry, for clarification, that employment must be unsubsidized, right? So
yes,
if someone returned and was working with our Title I partners on occupational skills training or work experience, that wouldn't count because it's subsidized.
correct.
Okay.
So we're going to look at each of these components of the credential attainment indicator in greater detail. This is just our first little snapshot of what it is and what we're dealing with. So let's think about who counts as part of the credential attainment indicator, first of all. Participants who come to us without a high school diploma or any other high school equivalency and enter the program at an assessed level of 9th grade or above and then exit the program, or participants who come to us without a high school diploma or a high school equivalency and then during their time with us advance to an assessed level of 9th grade or higher during a period of participation and then exit the program. So that 9th grade level is key to a participant counting for credential attainment. They don't go into the denominator of that performance measure. None of our students do unless they hit that 9th grade level or above on an assessment. That can be their initial assessment when they join the program, or it can be any subsequent assessment. If they come to us and they are assessed at a 5th grade level on their assessment of record, but they stick with us and they keep gaining on subsequent post-tests, at some point, if they hit that 9th grade level or above, then we know they're going to be counted as a potential person who could attain a credential through our program. If they never hit that 9th grade level, they'll never show for credential attainment on Table 5. So for example, our English language learners, unless they are able to get to the point where they're assessed on a TABE test at 9th grade or higher level, they won't show in the credential attainment portion of Table 5. Now, they'll still show in the employment indicators that we talked about last week, but they won't show up in the rows for credential attainment. Questions about that?
In addition to your example, sorry.
No, go ahead.
There would be the possibility that a student, what I would even call a fast-track GED student, who might be 10th or 11th grade in reading and language and 8.7 in math, and they work with us, upskill, and do quite well. But if we miss that post-test, then we can't count, and they exit, then while we might be able to count their employment, we couldn't count their diploma or their, or not diploma, sorry, their secondary credential because of that lack of a 9th grade level or higher on the math portion we were tracking.
Correct. Just for Table 5. But yes, that's right. A correct scenario. So when you do have somebody who's close, that's an important feature to consider. You know, you probably, I mean, in my mind, you would want to have the most chances for that person to count in your favor as possible. So if you think that they, you know, if I give them this TABE, he might get up to that 9th grade level, and then there's a potential that that could be a positive count on Table 5 for me as well. But again, once they exit, they'll have to meet one of those two criteria, either be in unsubsidized employment or be enrolled in some kind of post-secondary education or training program within a year after exit. Regardless, if they achieve their high school equivalency, they're still going to count for that measurable skill gain on Table 4. That's totally separate, and that doesn't depend on a 9th grade level. So, you know, you're still getting some positive result, but you're not getting the maximum potential positive result in that scenario. But I think that's a very good example, John, of how we need to start thinking about how these performance measures work.
And taking it back to Table 4 in your scenario here, let's say they come late in the year in that situation, and if they don't take and earn that math subtest and they leave us in, I don't know, late May or early June and don't earn that credential until July 7th because it's in the next program year,
Right.
we won't even be able to count it as a measurable skill gain if they don't have
12
more hours that
yeah.
next year.
Exactly. Yes.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, the 9th grade or higher is a key component of credential attainment and something to think about. The high school equivalency can be earned either during participation in the program or within 1 year of exit from the program. So they can get their high school equivalency and then exit, or they can exit and then get their high school equivalency. Either one works for credential attainment. But once they exit, they have to either gain employment, unsubsidized employment, or enroll in education or training program, which leads to a recognized post-secondary credential within 1 year after program exit, or that credential won't count on Table 5. And we have some guidance about acceptable types of credentials that count toward the credential attainment indicator. I'm going to list them off for you here. And here's where I think there's some gray area. An associate's degree, a bachelor's degree. Those are pretty clear-cut. Occupational licensure, an occupational certificate, including registered apprenticeship and career and technical education certificates, occupational certifications, or other recognized certificates of industry or occupational skills completion sufficient to qualify for entry-level employment or advancement in employment. So this doesn't have to be a degree program. It can be a licensure program. It can be a certification program, but it has to lead to a tangible employment benefit. It can't be something like, you know, they passed our basic hygiene training. They passed a soft skills test that we give all our participants. Those aren't specific enough to count for the kinds of programs that they're looking for here. So I think it's important to just note that there are some industry-based certifications that aren't degree programs or even formal programs outside of a business. One example that we run across often in Huron is that, you know, we have a lot of manufacturers who hire welders, and to a man, those businesses say it doesn't matter what certification they come to us with, we're going to do our own certification program with our employees here because we have standards that we need our employees to meet, and we have processes that we want them to follow. So somebody doesn't have to have a welding certificate to go to work at TrustBuilt in Huron, but through on-the-job training, they will gain those skills, and if they gain a welding certification from TrustBuilt in Huron, that, in my mind, would count as an occupational certification. Does that make sense?
Becky, that guidance you were reading, did that come from the TEAGLE?
That came out of the TEAGLE.
That's okay.
The other thing to remember here is participants only need to be enrolled in the education or training program within that 1 year of exit. They do not need to have completed the program. So obviously, if somebody exits our program and then enrolls in an associate's degree program, they won't finish within that 12-month period. Generally, there are some associate's programs that are a little bit shorter, but if you figure how the calendar year runs and how the school year runs, it would be pretty hard for them to complete the full associate's degree program. But as long as they're enrolled, that's what counts. Any other questions about that? I honestly think we're going to catch more people with employment here than we are with entering post-secondary in a lot of cases. I don't want to dismiss the fact that some of our students do enter post-secondary, but I do think that it's a smaller percentage than the number of our students who go on to employment. Now, Jennifer at Southeast Tech and Kay and Nancy and Carla at Lake Area Tech might see different percentages in their programs because they're right there with the technical schools, and that enrollment might be more of a logical next step for some of their participants. So you can definitely disagree with me on that.
And I think this too would be a really good topic. I think many of the local office managers have good working understanding, but there are others who might be newer, who don't fully see the need for communication on this particular topic in terms of entering job training within 1 year of exit of common participants. And I think on the employment side of things, I would concur with you. I mean, the data certainly support that given our entered post-secondary rates. And, sometimes, a good continuum of services, they might be enrolled before they actually exit us in certain situations in the job training program. And so that's great. I'm willing to certainly take the hit on any sequential performance outcomes if we can provide high quality services, because ultimately, it'll be compensated and supported across the second quarter after exit employment, fourth quarter, and median earnings and measurable skill gains. And so we're not putting the proverbial eggs in one basket, I guess.
Exactly. Now, the tougher one, I think, of the two, both to understand and to attain, is the post-secondary credential. And this one, again, it's totally new to us. And WIOA defines a recognized post-secondary credential as, and I'm quoting again out of the guidance, out of the TEGL, a credential consisting of an industry-recognized certificate or certification, a certificate of completion of an apprenticeship, a license recognized by the state or federal government, or an associate or bachelor's degree. And again, these can't be general skills certificates like a work readiness certificate. They have to show attainment of measurable technical or industry skills necessary to either obtain employment or to advance within an industry or an occupation. But they can include standards met by employers, which again, I think gives us a little bit more latitude when dealing with certain businesses in our own communities where employers do have their own certification programs for their employees, or company-specific standards that their employees have to be trained on and are required to meet. And I know Laura joined us. I know that Laura is going to be providing training on one of the other features. So this indicator is limited to participants who are co-enrolled. So if they're enrolled in a post-secondary education or training program, including integrated education and training programs, IET programs, and Laura is going to be providing training on integrated education and training programs in upcoming webinars for anybody who has additional questions about what constitutes an IET program for use in determining that post-secondary education for credential attainment. I am one of those people who wants more information on that, so I'm very much looking forward to Laura's webinars concerning IETs. Any questions about post-secondary credentials? I think this one is tougher for most of us. Although Laura assures me that IET is not as intimidating as it sounds when you read about it in the legislation. So maybe there's a little more hope than I think.
I will hope so. From the information that's available to us, it doesn't seem as intimidating as it might on first glance.
Okay. I'm going to trust you.
Sounds good.
Okay. And hopefully you all got the email on those webinars. It went out, I think, just the end of last week or the beginning of this. So, credential attainment, what's new? The receipt of a secondary credential only counts if the participant is also employed or in post-secondary education within 1 year of exit. The receipt of a post-secondary credential can count for a credential attainment, and there's 1 year follow-up needed for that secondary credential component. What's not new is the receipt of a secondary credential without employment or post-secondary entry is still counted, but only as part of a measurable skill gain and only on Table 4, not on Table 5. So there are 2 places now that we can show that completion of a high school equivalency. On Table 4 as part of measurable skill gain, and on Table 5 potentially as a credential indicator, a credential attainment indicator. So if you don't have that follow-up, you're not going to lose the count on Table 4. They just won't show on Table 5. Same thing with that 9th grade assessed level. You're not going to lose credit for them on Table 4. They just won't show for you on Table 5. So let's look at Table 5 just quickly. Of course, Table 5 shows core follow-up outcome achievement. That has not changed. It provides performance indicator rates by participants and periods of participation. The periods of participation are new. And it shows a record of state performance on those WIOA indicators used for our performance targets. And those performance rates are also used to populate the joint statewide performance template. Table 5 is still an exit-based table. So it includes only people who have exited our program. And again, it counts only the people who were at 9th grade or higher level at entry or at some time during their enrollment for that secondary credential. And the post-secondary credential counts exiters who were co-enrolled in some form of post-secondary education, including IET programs, integrated education and training programs. And again, we've got our note on the bottom that exclusions might apply to these exit-based indicators, and we'll talk about that towards the end of our presentation. So again, like the other exit-based indicators of employment, this is a different group of participants from everybody in the other tables because of the follow-up time. These participants attended in prior years, and our other tables only include participants from this program year. There's a time lag for reporting up to 1 year after exit. And of course, we're also accounting for that time lag in the UI database, not just for the employment measures of entered and retained employment, but also for that employment determination for the credential indicator. So for that reason, we're not going to report any data this year for Table 5. We'll have partial data next year and full data the following year. But we won't have anything on Table 5 because, like we talked about last week, they would have been asking us to report on measures that didn't exist when we were serving the participants who would be counted, and that's not really fair. So we aren't reporting Table 5 this year. A couple of other things to note that I think are important. Employment counts even if a person is employed prior to gaining their high school equivalency. It's just important that they remain employed in the collection quarter or in that collection period. Post-secondary entry can be beyond 1 year after exit as long as it falls within the follow-up quarter of the 1 year anniversary date. So for example, if a participant exits on May 2nd, 2017, but doesn't enter a post-secondary training program until June 15th, 2018, it still counts. That's the same as the employment measurement that we talked about last week. That collection quarter is the important time frame. And John talked about looking at our current data as far as employment versus post-secondary training entry. This is a look at what new Table 5 will look like, and it's just the credential pieces. The employment will also be on here, but I wanted to make it big enough so we could actually read it. So I just included the 3 rows that talk about credential attainment. So you can see, again, across the top, we're going to look at the number of participants who exited, the number of participants who exited and achieved the outcome or a median earnings value, the percent that achieved that outcome, and then you're going to look at the total periods of participation, the number of periods of participation where someone achieved the outcome or the median earnings value, and the percent of the periods of participation where the people achieved an outcome. So we've got kind of that 2 halves to the same table again. Columns B through D reflect the first period of participation, and columns E through G reflect all subsequent periods of participation. And if we look at the core follow-up outcome measures, we can see that we're going to be marking the attainment of secondary school equivalent in different rows based on the follow-up component that determines credential attainment. So this first row is only going to be participants who entered at that 9th grade level or achieved that 9th grade level or above, and then attained a secondary school diploma or recognized equivalent and enrolled in post-secondary education or training within 1 year of exit. So we're going to see everybody who fit all the criteria for credential attainment and then enrolled in some kind of post-secondary education or training within 1 year of exit. The second row, we're going to see anyone who attained a secondary school diploma or recognized equivalent and was employed within 1 year of exit. So we're going to track them separately. I'm not 100% sure how we're going to figure denominators on these, because everybody who doesn't achieve one of those 2 things is going to have to count on one row or the other, and I can't imagine that everybody counts in the denominator and only half the people count in the numerator, or a percentage of people count in the numerator. So I didn't see any good explanation for how this is figured, and I will be interested to see how they're going to do that. And I don't know, John, have you had any guidance from LACES or from anywhere else how the denominator is going to work but in that split?
So if I understand correctly your question, if I rephrased it, would be, how do we treat individuals who were at the 9th grade level or higher who did exit during that program year but didn't succeed in transitioning to post-secondary or employment?
Yes.
Where they populate the denominator, correct?
Yes.
No, that's going on my question list, though.
That's
a great question.
I know. As I was prepping, I was like, I don't understand how this works. And I couldn't find an
Laura, do you have any idea? And Becky, I want to say cohorts at this group, but I know we're getting away from that. They're not cohorts. Can you help me with the terminology here in terms of what I call that group in column B?
I've still been calling them cohorts. I don't know any other word. I mean, I know we're not really supposed to use that one, but they haven't given us a good replacement. So yeah, at first glance, I looked at this and I thought, well, that's, it's good that they split that up, because it's something that I would be interested to track for my own program to see, where are we getting more of these outcomes achieved? And I think I know the answer for myself, but it'll be interesting to look at the data as they come in. But then I got to thinking, how are we actually going to figure a percentage on this? So yeah, I'm interested to know how the denominators will populate there.
Or would they, I mean, when you say it that way, wouldn't we have to?
Yeah, do we have to pick? I mean, I can't predict.
Or would they populate both? Or
Yeah.
would they populate both if you were doing a percentage?
And the percentages would just be skewed smaller because you're looking at, yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. Okay.
I don't have illumination on that one either, John.
Yeah, it's confusing. And then the last one there, obviously attained a post-secondary credential while enrolled or within 1 year of exit, is a little more clear-cut because there's only one way to measure that one. They attained that credential at some point, either while they were co-enrolled in an IET or another program, or after leaving our program, they completed that post-secondary credential within 1 year of exit.
So with this outcome measure, if I understood you correctly, and you referenced Laura's training, this cohort or this group here will be comprised only of those individuals who on NRS Table 3 are marked as being part of an integrated education and training program.
You know, I'm not 100% clear on that either, John, or if it could also count co-enrollments of another kind, such as apprenticeship, which I don't think would necessarily count as an IET, although I don't know.
And I think of STIs,
right.
ability to benefit program where people are co-enrolled and
yeah, so you know, I don't know if that, I don't know if that would be considered an IET. IET is something that they are counting though, and I think they specifically referenced that because when they initially started talking about this measure, they weren't going to allow IET to count. And everybody at the July training that Laura and I went to was up in arms about that because they're like, well, you told us to form these IET programs and now you're saying they're not going to count for this. What's the point of enrolling them in IET if you can't count them as a post-secondary credential? So that was a shift that the feds made as a result of...
That shows the power of pressure there, really?
Apparently.
Wow.
Plus they probably realized it was dumb. I don't know. So yeah, I probably shouldn't say that when we're recording, should I? So a few answers for you there on Table 5, but more questions, showing that, you know, I'm not really an expert trainer on this yet. But then Table 5, what's new? Again, we've got the outcomes changed to those WIOA required measures. We no longer have the rows and columns for sampling because that doesn't matter. There are different criteria for how people populate the tables. No data matching or survey. And the response rate is irrelevant because the overall rate is calculated for all non-excluded participants who meet the criteria. And the number and outcomes by period of participation are reported. So that's just our little summary. Let's take a look at a person. We've got Christopher again. We visited him several times. Christopher became a participant in October 2015 in ABE Level 4, which is former High Intermediate ABE. He achieved an EFL gain, so he got up to Low Adult Secondary, but dropped out in December 2015. He came back in April 2016, passed the GED tests in June 2016 to get his secondary credential, and then exited the program. So, as far as credential indicators, Christopher moved into ABE Level 5, which is 9th grade equivalent or above, during his first period of participation, and then he began the second period of participation at that level as well. So he would be included in the credential measure denominator for both periods of participation. He received his GED in the second period of performance, but he has to be employed or have entered into post-secondary education within 1 year after exit from that period of participation in order to count in the numerator. So you've got the full year after exit from the period of participation in which he achieved his high school equivalency. So we're going to look at a hypothetical way that I think Table 5 could populate. Just for Christopher, if we were isolating him. So say Christopher exits our program in June and gets a job, okay? In that case, he would populate Table 5 like this, we think. So columns B through D reflect that first period of participation. So he was a participant who exited in that first period of participation, and he was, by the time he finished that period of participation, at 9th grade level or above. He did not achieve that credential during that period of participation. So he's a 0% for us in column D at that point. However, he came back in April and finished his high school equivalency by June, and then he was employed. He got a job, and we're going to consider him employed for that full year after exit. I think he's going to do well. He seems like a good kid to me. So when we go over and look at the total periods of participation, he had 2 periods of participation, and in one of those periods of participation, he did achieve the outcome of his high school equivalency and that follow-up of being employed within 1 year after exit. So our total percent for Christopher all by himself would be 50% achieving that outcome. Questions about that?
Well, I'm a little, help me here. So he exited and he did gain employment within 1 calendar year?
Yeah, we're making that up.
Of exit?
Yes.
Right? So in that first period, okay, so column C, Charlie,
it's just that first period of participation.
No, because he didn't automatically transition, right?
Right.
Or
he didn't achieve his.
This isn't measurable skill gain, because I'm getting confused, I think,
Yeah.
with that measurable skill gain, because
Yes.
period 1 he made a gain, and then period 2 he got that GED. But we're just looking at this from an employment,
Right.
and for that first pop.
Right. And from the standpoint of achieving his high school equivalency, he didn't achieve his high school equivalency in that first period of participation, even though he achieved that 9th grade level. But I think, John, your point is a good one, because Table 4 and Table 5 can reflect very different things as far as periods of participation go here. Because you're right, on Table 4, Christopher would have a positive outcome for his first period of participation because he gained an EFL. And then he would have a positive outcome for his second period of participation because he achieved his high school equivalency. And we don't care if he got a job or not on Table 4. So he would actually count for 100% for us on Table 4 because he has an achievement, a measurable skill gain in each of his periods of participation. But on Table 5, it's a different picture, because in his first period of participation, even though he hit that 9th grade assessed level, he didn't earn his credential. And then he did earn his credential in his second period of participation. So that drops his percentage down to 50%, or our percentage down to 50%, with 2 POPs and only 1 outcome.
But I can't read it in terms of he exited that whole scenario and was employed, say, in August, that following August, and that's within 1 year, right?
But the employment, we're not looking at the employment here. He would also count for employment in his second and fourth quarters after exit, but we're only looking at the credential attainment rows.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome. I know it's very confusing. And I think once we have real people, it will make more sense to us. I hope it does. I don't know. Table 5 has always been a thorn in my side. We'll look quickly at Table 5A. Table 5A works the same as Table 5. So if you understand Table 5, you'll understand Table 5A. It's just the indicators for the people who are in distance education, unduplicated and by periods of participation. So it's Table 5A is a subset of Table 5 for those people who have the majority of their contact hours in distance education rather than in face-to-face program. And it works exactly the same as Table 5. New WIOA performance, no more sampling, no more data matching, no more response rate, and multiple periods of participation. This is a little bit of a review from last week, but I thought it was, confusing enough that we could probably bear a little bit of a review. Again, Table 5 is reporting on exit-based indicators, so it has different time periods and participants from those of other tables, and it's based on the exit quarter of the indicator. It's going to take us 3 program years to get that full data. Again, we're not reporting this year. We'll have 2 quarters to report on for next year, and then we'll have a full 4 quarters of reporting on Table 5 for the following year, program year 2018, the 2019 report. And again, this is the other one, John, that we were fuzzy on last week. The credential measure and 4th quarter employment reported for a calendar year, not a program year starting in 2018. And I think you made a note of that last week, that we're not 100% sure how that's going to work. And we wanted to ask. Someone smarter than us must know.
Correct. And I think that was the first I had heard of it.
Right. Yeah. So again, if we look at Christopher, he became a participant in October 2016, achieved a level gain, dropped out in December 2016. He returned in April, passed his GED in June 2017 to get his secondary credential, and then he exited. So Christopher moved into ABE level 5, which is 9th grade equivalent, during his first period of participation, and he began his second period of participation at that level. He's included in the credential measure for both periods of participation. But because he achieved his high school equivalency in his second period of participation, he must be employed or have entered post-secondary education within 1 year of exit from that second period of participation to complete the credential indicator successfully. So his exit when he achieved his high school equivalency was June 2016, which means that he has until the April, May, June 2017 exit quarter to achieve either employment or post-secondary education and count as a positive outcome on our credential indicator. Does that make sense?
I think so.
But I think so too. That was one that was pretty simple. Let's look at another person. Angela never finished school and has been unemployed for several months. She decides to get her diploma in the hopes of getting into a degree program. She became a participant in ABE Level 4 in October 2016 and then dropped out in December. She returned in April. She achieved an EFL gain, passed the GED tests in June, and then exited. So Angela, again, has 2 periods of participation, one that ended in December 2016 and one ending in June 2017. But she's not included in the credential attainment indicator for the first period of participation because she didn't gain an EFL to move into ABE Level 5, or that 9th grade assessed level, until her second period of participation. So she won't count on Table 5 for her first period of participation at all because she wasn't at least a 9th grade level or above. She will count, though, for that second period of participation because she achieved Level 5 during that period and then exited. Is that clear?
So even though Christopher and Angela both made measurable skill gains and both earned their GED credentials in the same sort of pops, Christopher's overall percentage is 50%, given the way he came, or the way he, the sequence of these events, particularly his post-test,
right,
where Angela's going to count 100%.
Exactly right. Exactly right. It's all a timing thing. And I think it just underscores, too, how important tracking those periods of participation is, and you're doing everything we can to avoid more periods of participation than we necessarily have to have. So Angela would successfully achieve the credential attainment indicator as long as she's either employed or has entered post-secondary education within 1 year of exit, again, from her second period of participation, which ended in June. So we've got until that April, May, June 2017 quarter for her to attain either entry into post-secondary or unsubsidized employment, and then she'll count as a positive on her credential attainment. So just as John said, you worked beautifully for me, John, as long as Angela follows through with her initial goal of entering a post-secondary program, remember she wanted to enter a degree program if she could get her high school equivalency, she would, in theory, populate Table 5 like this. She would only have one period of participation in which she was eligible for the credential attainment indicator because in her first period of participation, she stayed below that 9th grade level. So she would populate Table 5 for her second period of participation because that's where she achieved an EFL gain, putting her at the 9th grade skill level or above. And she achieved that high school equivalency, and if she did enroll in post-secondary education within 1 year after exit, she would be 100% straight across because she had that one period of participation and she achieved the high school equivalency and entered post-secondary. So in this case, Angela would have 2 periods of participation that reported on Table 4, and she would actually end up at 50% on Table 4 because in her first period of participation, she didn't gain, she didn't make a measurable skill gain, and in her second, she did. But she would only have one period of participation that reported on Table 5, and she would count for 100% on Table 5. So she's the exact opposite of Christopher when you look at Table 4 performance and Table 5 performance. I think it's really interesting how different the pictures can look based on those periods of performance and how all of the indicators work with those periods of performance. Any questions about that? I'm very interested to see how all of this is going to work from a data entry, data management standpoint. And I know John has had a little bit of a sneak peek at some of the things that LACES is working on for Table 4. I'm sure that Table 5 is kind of on the back burner since we're not reporting on it this year. But I think it will be interesting as more of those features roll out to see how everything works and what we have to do to make everything reflect accurately what's happening with our students. Before I let you go, I just wanted to touch again on the fact that participant exclusions from the indicators do apply to the credential attainment as well. These are the exit-based indicators, and these reasons for exit allow for the exclusion of a participant from all the performance indicators, measurable skill gain and credential attainment, and the employment indicators as well. If the participant is incarcerated or enters into a 24-hour support facility, such as a hospital or treatment center, they can be excluded. If they're entering medical treatment that lasts more than 90 days, they can be excluded. If the participant is deceased, they can be excluded. And if they're called into active duty in the National Guard or other armed services for at least a 90-day period, they can be excluded as well. And again, we talked about, they may be excluded and the pros and cons of maybe keeping them or not keeping them. Those exit-based indicators, you have to follow up within that calendar or that program year or the 1 year after exit, the 1 year after exit. So if these things are going to prevent a participant from being able to count for you on those follow-up measures, it's probably in your best interest to exit them due to an exclusion, I think. And then, of course, the corrections exclusions under Section 225 of WIOA, those participants who remain incarcerated after exit are included in the MSG indicator but excluded from the employment indicators, the median earnings indicator, and the credential indicator because they can't achieve those follow-up determiners. So they're excluded from those measures, but they will count in the measurable skill gain indicator on Table 4. That's all I have. Does anybody have any questions? I kind of feel like I gave you more questions than answers on this last one. This one is a sticky one for me. I'm hopeful that we have a little more guidance coming out that explains some of the less strongly identified areas, I guess, that have come out in the guidance so far.
I would like to thank you and Laura and Kim and all of the data specialists, frankly, for attending and participating, and the scenarios, the graphic organizers, and the timelines. I have found those invaluable, and you've really truly helped me unpack this, and in doing so, it's been so efficacious now that we have some well-informed, meaningful, hopefully actionable questions that will impact everything from our intake process to our data collection to our data entry to how we, work with LACIS or Literacy Pro Systems as an individual state and as a consortium to, leverage some of that pressure as well for responsiveness. But just the glimpse I've seen in terms of how they have the periods of participation, it looks fairly intuitive, and so I feel optimistic.
Very good. Thank you, John. And I should just mention too, I know we've been putting the recordings out, and I'm not 100% sure where we are on getting those disseminated to everyone, but the recordings do exist, and if they're not already available, they will be made available to everybody in the field. If anybody wants the PowerPoint slides as well, if they would be helpful to you at all, just shoot me an email and I'm happy to share those as well. I know Kim is working on some updates to the South Dakota All website, and once we have that at a manageable place, I think we can also put the PowerPoints up as a resource that people could pull out, because I do think, those scenarios are invaluable to me in understanding. I can't really think about data without connecting it to whether it's a real student or a hypothetical student and how that data works with a real person. So if that would be helpful to you, I'm certainly willing to share all those PowerPoints as well. So just let me know if you'd like them and I can email them to you.
You will receive an email request from me. I would like to have these as reference.
Sure. No, I will happily share them.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. If nobody else has any other questions, I will let you go. I hope you all have a wonderful Friday and a very good weekend. It sounds like Sunday is supposed to be a gorgeous day in Huron. I don't know about the rest of the state. But hopefully you can get outside and enjoy some spring-like weather.
Thanks, Becky.
You're welcome.
Enjoy your weekend. Thanks, everyone.